Good evening, I'm Peter Mansbridge, and this is The National. A crushing accident grounds a star athlete bound for his second Olympics.
I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to be back.
The extreme injuries to top-ranked Canadian snowboarder Mark McMorris. The news we broke about Ottawa's pot plan sets the provinces buzzing.
We're also concerned about ensuring that we don't somehow kickstart another black market.
Plus, Montrealers wind up coaching North Korea's hockey team. But who got taught a lesson?
We lost the first game 16-1, I think.
He is fresh off a World Cup championship in snowboarding, with the nation's hopes for Olympic glory already riding on his shoulders. But tonight, Mark McMorris is in intensive care in hospital after a horrific snowboarding accident. His injuries seem enough to sideline any athlete. But as Chris Brown reports, for McMorris, comebacks are nothing new.
Canadian Mark McMorris has been on a tear, flying high and winning everything over the past year.
I'm stoked. Feels good to get a win again. Shout out Mom, shout out Dad, shout out Craig.
With the competition over for this season, on Saturday, the 23-year-old and his brother Craig took snowmobiles into the mountains near Whistler for some backcountry boarding and big jumps.
There was fog kind of coming in and out, and Mark unfortunately drifted a little bit too far left. And when I say drifted left, we were hitting a feature. He goes a little too far left and ended up in a clump of trees.
A feature could be a natural cliff or something built by boarders, such as what McMorris is seen jumping in this video.
It was a significant fall. Obviously, he's in hospital. He was going at a very high rate of velocity into trees, and I mean, it really sucks. I was there, like, holding him. He was with it. He was answering questions. He was there. He was obviously in the most amount of pain I've ever seen a human being.
In a release, Canada Snowboard's team physicians said the injuries to McMorris's shattered body included a fractured jaw, a fractured left arm, a ruptured spleen, a stable pelvic fracture, rib fractures, and a collapsed left lung. Only the day before the accident,
My first run felt really good to me.
McMorris spoke to CBC Vancouver from Whistler's chairlift. He and other boarders were profiled in this upcoming documentary about their love for the sport. The CBC's Jacqueline Dory spent a week with them.
He loves to go in the backcountry and snowboard with his friends and progress the sport in so many ways. To him, it's the basics. And that's what backcountry is to these gentlemen. It's the basics.
One more bend and no!
McMorris's body has been beat up a lot. He won bronze in Sochi in 2014 boarding with a broken rib.
Frontside triple cork. Oh!
Last year, he broke the largest bone in his leg, but his brother says it's too soon to say how long this will take to recover from.
He's had surgeries, and I think that's the end of it. I can't be certain. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, but he's the hardest worker in the world, and I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to be back.
Snowboard Canada's release is sounding cautiously optimistic. It says it believes McMorris has what it takes and time to get back for the next Olympics a year out, where he would easily be one of the most exciting athletes to watch. Chris Brown, CBC News, Vancouver.
Before his accident, McMorris was a favorite to win 2 gold medals at the next Winter Olympics in snowboard slopestyle and a new event. Big air snowboarding is making its Olympic debut in Pyeongchang in 2018 with one of the largest big air ramps in the world. McMorris helped test it out last November at a World Cup competition where he took 3rd. Olympic organizers are hoping big air will draw a new and younger audience to the Games. The Trudeau government will be the one that legalizes marijuana, but as CBC News reported last night, a big part of the execution will be left to the provinces. Ottawa will introduce its legislation in the next 2 weeks. It will regulate and secure the commercial pot supply and set a legal age to buy 18. Then it's up to the provinces. David Cochran broke this story last night. Tonight, he has the reaction.
We know the marijuana legislation is coming around April 10th and that Ottawa wants it legalized by Canada Day of 2018. But there are still many gray areas as Canada moves to end the black market for pot.
Before I say more, I need to see the text of the bill. Because a lot of the details, of course, have to be clarified.
We haven't landed yet on the key decision factors yet because we need to consult with Albertans.
Ottawa will legalize it, but the provinces will decide who gets to buy and sell marijuana and for how much, which means a lot of big decisions need to be sorted out.
We have not made any decisions. All those policy options are on the table. We're doing, of course, very detailed analysis on all policy options.
And there aren't just questions about how to design the legal market. There's concerns about the health and social consequences of pot being widely and legally available. Ottawa is promising public awareness campaigns for marijuana similar to ones that detail the risk of alcohol and tobacco.
So I think you'll see those same kinds of public health measures and mechanisms in place as we introduce cannabis in a way that is regulated, that is restricted, and that has a strong public health campaign.
I'm glad to hear that Minister Philpott stating that, because for us that is incredibly important.
Police forces say that's key, especially for the risks of driving while impaired due to drugs. They argue young people in particular don't see it as having the same risk as driving drunk. And then there's the challenge of policing drug driving without a roadside test as effective as the breathalyzer.
Drug impaired driving has always been a significant concern with moving forward with the legislation. We do need the science to catch up.
The other law enforcement concern is the plan to allow people to grow their own marijuana with a limit of up to 4 plants per house. Police say that's a safety concern because it removes some cannabis from the secure, regulated national supply. And as a practical concern, they say that limit of 4 plants will be difficult to enforce. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
News of the impending legislation was a boon to markets today, not to mention the people who hope to do the actual legal selling. But as Jacqueline Hansen tells us, there is still a lot to be decided before that will happen.
Tanya Sailoom's Toronto pot shop is one of many that tried to stake a claim on the Canadian marijuana market before it becomes legal. Her shop was open less than a year before the landlord locked her out.
I still think there's hope.
Now Sailoom is looking for a new location in hopes the federal framework for legalization will finally give small independent dispensaries the green light.
It's exciting news. At the same time, it's also a little bit alarming because it's scary to think like what they're actually going to set out.
Since Ottawa will leave it to the provinces to decide how marijuana is distributed and sold, some suspect licensed alcohol retailers like Ontario's LCBO will do double duty and sell recreational pot. When it comes to medical dispensaries, pharmacy chains like Shoppers Drug Mart want in, but consumers are hungry for concrete details.
I don't mind it being in dispensaries or the LCBO because I mainly wanted to see legalization due to taxing because government makes money off of it. We all prosper from that.
As long as it's in a controlled environment, I think it's fine.
Whiffs of what legalization will look like lit up investors' confidence today. Canadian pot stocks surged. Shares of Canopy Growth Corporation, a producer valued at $1.7 billion, jumped more than 11%. Canopy already sells medical marijuana, and its founder says he's ready to expand the business to the recreational market in any way the legal framework allows.
If we can make infused liquids, great. If we can make some kind of packaged consumable product that could be in a flavor or not, great. If it's a rolled product, great. But we have to be ready for all those.
This consultant is wary that investors' enthusiasm over pot stocks may be overblown.
There's a high level of uncertainty as to what the future of this industry is going to look like. So there's going to be additional risk in this industry versus others.
Analysts estimate the legal Canadian pot market could grow to be worth billions of dollars annually. But which businesses will get to cash in on all that green is still entirely unclear. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
Senator Lynn Bayak says she needs no more education about residential schools and stands by her assertion that plenty of good came out of them.
If you go across Canada, there are shining examples from sea to sea of people who owe their lives to the schools.
Bayak acknowledges atrocities were committed at the government and church-run schools. She says she has suffered alongside Indigenous Canadians who were forced to go to them in her decades living in Northern Ontario, and says she will not resign her seat on the Senate's Aboriginal Peoples Committee. Coming up, we speak to Marine Le Pen, the candidate driving apart France's two solitudes.
It's like a vicious circle because these two things can feed each other.
Plus, Russia's mini revolution. Did youth really rise up? A British Columbia woman has waited a long time for this day. Her lawsuit against CP Rail has finally gone to trial. She was critically injured when her car was struck at a railway crossing, and her case has uncovered evidence that Transport Canada had been warning about the crossing for years. The CBC's Dave Seglins explains.
It happened here 3 years ago. A freight train just like this one slammed into a car that was blocking the rail crossing. This gray Mercedes was totaled, its driver critically injured.
I feel upset. I even feel angry.
Jane Wong's career as a project manager and MBA over in an instant, leaving her with permanent brain and spinal injuries, struggling to walk, to concentrate.
I think they just need to little bit of thing, put on warning light or gate. This would never happen to me or to anybody else.
The crossing where Wong was hit is one of the most accident-prone in Canada. No bells, no gates, no flashing lights. And it runs so close to the busy highway, despite the warning, do not stop on tracks, drivers have no choice as they wait to pull out. When Wong was hit, bushes were so overgrown they blocked the view. CP Rail cut them back days later. Now, CP denies any negligence, but Wong's lawsuit has uncovered repeated warnings from Transport Canada, 1990, 1994, 2003, and 2007, to close the crossing or install safety gates. But nothing's changed. Wong's lawyer says it was an accident waiting to happen.
This, unfortunately, is not the only crossing that was problematic.
At the next street over, officials have installed bells and gates, but still, with so little room, a year and a half ago, an ambulance was hit, killing the 87-year-old patient inside. We showed CP Rail's CEO, Keith Creel, photos of the crossing where Jane Wong was hurt.
This is one of the more accident-prone ones in the entire country.
But that's not the only one. There are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of those in the country.
Right. There are hundreds of them. Do you think that's a safe crossing?
I think when society grew, that railroad track was there. When they put that there, they should have taken that into account. I think this setup, this scenario, is not an ideal situation. No, it's not.
This is just one railway crossing, still waiting for costly upgrades. Now, Canada is increasing its safety standards, phasing them in over the next 5 years. But with 15,000 public railway crossings and many hundreds of them in need of repair, getting them all fixed for that 2021 deadline seems unlikely. Dave Seglin, CBC News, Langley, British Columbia.
This next story isn't about rail safety, but accessibility. A Toronto couple would like to travel together on the same train. The problem is, they say, Via Rail can only accommodate one of them. Fez Jamil has the details.
Marie Murphy and Martin Anderson prefer to travel by train, but Via Rail only has space for one scooter per train in the passenger section they travel, which puts the couple in a bind.
The other device has to be collapsible, so you have to be mobile enough to be able to transfer, right? So if you have two people with wheelchairs who can't transfer, they cannot ride their train together.
They say past experience shows a scooter in the storage area can get damaged. Since 2005, the couple has fought Via, demanding more spaces for scooters and wheelchairs. Last month, the Canadian Transportation Agency ruled in their favor, but Via is now appealing that. The company declined an interview or to speak on this case, but in a statement told CBC, accessibility to each train for multiple travelers with a wheelchair will be one of the key requirements of the new fleet. We plan to complete the delivery of the new fleet within 3 to 4 years from the moment we get an approval of funds. The space for a second scooter takes up 2 regular seats. This transportation advocate says the lack of federal funding means Via is hesitant to lose that money or charge more to make up the difference.
They would lose probably seats at the high demand
area. Instead of going to Montreal for $44, you'd probably pay $140 in the peak time, and they would lose those 2 seats.
Disability advocates say Via Rail's accessibility is lower than similar services in the U.S. and U.K.
The need for this kind of accommodation is only going to grow because our population is aging. The greatest cause of disability is aging, so there's going to be need for more and more of this.
Murphy and Anderson say Via's decision to appeal is disappointing.
I think they take accessibility seriously as long as it doesn't cost them any money. And this may cost them money.
New trains may offer the space the couple needs, but they don't know how much longer they'll have to wait to travel together again. Fez Jamil, CBC News, Toronto.
25 years after a commercial fishing ban devastated Newfoundland and Labrador, northern cod are making a comeback, but not enough to expand the fishery. Today, the federal government said the stock levels remain in a critical zone.
We are still in the lower half of the critical zone. So even though there's optimism, we're going to have to temper that with a little bit of patience, I think.
But the union says an expanded cod fishery would protect shrimp and crab. Those stocks are now in decline because northern cod eat them. There's fresh concern over gun safety after a new study was published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal today. It reports that almost every day in Ontario, a child or young person is injured by a firearm. But as Vicadopia reports, there are also questions about the report itself and whether it truly paints an accurate picture of gun safety.
Darius Thorne's hoop dreams were shattered after the popular high school student was shot dead last month.
At first, I didn't want to go to sleep because to wake up was the nightmare. You're reminded that you're back in this thing, but you kind of finding your ways to cope.
Darius's death is an extreme example of the problem with firearms misuse. According to new research, over 5 years there were nearly 1,800 people under 25 who were admitted to hospital with firearms injuries in Ontario. The study did not differentiate between non-lethal firearms and licensed guns. 3/4 of the injuries were unintentional, 1/4 were assaults. Most shootings happened in cities, but rural Ontario's rate of accidental shootings is disproportionately high. It all adds up to almost 1 shooting injury a day.
When I first saw the total number of injuries, it was staggering.
This pediatrician who did the research says young people born in Canada face a higher risk of being shot than new Canadians, but there were some troubling exceptions.
Refugees have about a 43% higher risk of being a victim of firearm assault, and children and youth from Central America and Africa have a 3- and 4-fold higher risk of being a victim of firearm assault compared with Canadian-born children.
Firearms injury in young people is not well documented in Canada, so it's hard to put the numbers in context, which is a problem for this gun owner.
They don't tell you if it's an airsoft gun or a BB gun or a paintball marker. The injuries, they don't describe any of the injuries at all.
It's a fair point. Nonetheless, firearms safety remains a serious concern. The authors point out more young men and teens are killed in this country by guns than fires, falls, and drownings combined. Vicadopia, CBC News, Toronto.
Straight ahead, the aftermath of Russia's protests crackdown. Relentless flooding continued to ravage Peru today, devastating the country's infrastructure. Roadways from country lanes to major highways are literally being washed away. Over 500 bridges have been damaged or destroyed. More than 80 people have died and thousands more are homeless as heavy rains drag on. Meanwhile, Queensland, Australia prepares for dangerous Cyclone Debbie. It's expected to hit as a powerful Category 4 storm, the strongest in years. Thousands of people have been forced out from the coast. Protesting against corruption in Vladimir Putin's Russia has landed a prominent opposition leader in jail again, but this time along with hundreds of followers. Alexei Navalny organized a wave of demonstrations over the weekend, and the large turnout alarmed authorities enough to crack down and hard. Susan Ormiston has more.
In the middle of that hard ring of black, a protester takes blows and kicks from authorities reacting viciously to Sunday's demonstration. Another who dares to oppose is dragged off. More than 600 people were rounded up in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other places, detained in what the Kremlin called an illegal protest. Organizer Alexei Navalny spent the night in jail, surrendering his shoelaces, proud, he said, of the courage of the tens of thousands who did turn out. In court today, Navalny was sentenced to the next 15 days, locked up for defying a police officer and for organizing the demonstration. I've been expecting nothing but the court's ruling against me, he said this morning, after years of legal pursuits meant to silence him and thwart his ambition to be president. Navalny has been stirring up an anti-corruption campaign. With this YouTube video gone viral, 13 million views. The focus is Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev and allegations by Navalny's team that Medvedev has sucked away millions under the guise of charities. Sunday's protest did hold a hint of surprise. Tens of thousands, the biggest in 5 years, and young protesters. In the crowd, Dmitry Gudkov, a former deputy in the Russian Duma.
I saw a lot of fearless people, and especially young generation. Many experts call that teenagers, right?
Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said minors were recruited and offered rewards to participate.
Don't pay attention. They don't know what to say, how to answer, and how to respond on that action. I think that they are really nervous. Alexei Navalny managed to create an emotion.
That's why they keep dragging him off, disrupting his fledgling campaign to run for president. Many expect an aftershock, further crackdowns on opposition figures, as President Vladimir Putin, feigning any concern, still keeps his eyes on unruly disruptors, just a year away from the next presidential election. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Toronto.
Coming up, what does it take to be French?
French national identity is now more than ever like a club, and to be accepted into it, you have to be white.
A candidate for president stirs anti-Muslim sentiment. We talk to Marine Le Pen. Plus, a family's generosity is foiled by a mix-up at the morgue. Time to check the day's business numbers. The TSX was up 63 points. The Canadian dollar saw little change. In New York, the Dow fell 45 points. The price of oil was down 24 cents a barrel.
La politique des Français, pour les Français, avec les Français.
Marine Le Pen is running for president of France. And when she talks about government for the French, she doesn't mean all French citizens, not by a long shot. As leader of France's National Front, she's a champion of white voters with deep roots in the culture. She fans suspicion of immigrants and even French-born Muslims. Tensions are high in the lead-up to next month's election, but as you'll see, those tensions have been simmering for decades. Here's Terence McKenna with France's Two Solitudes, produced in cooperation with the Radio Canada program Enquête.
In French opinion polls, Marine Le Pen and her anti-immigrant National Front Party have had a consistent lead in the run-up to the first round of the presidential election in April. Le Pen inherited the party from her father, Jean-Marie.
Dans 20 ans, la France sera une république islamique.
He was both Islamophobic and anti-Semitic.
De l'histoire de la guerre, à moins
He dismissed the Holocaust as a detail of history. Part of Marine Le Pen's success was to turn her back on her father's anti-Semitism. She even cast him out of the party so that she would look more moderate to voters, a move she is proud of.
L'antisémitisme, et pas plus que le racisme d'ailleurs, n'ont sa place dans le projet qui est celui du Front National, qui est un projet à destination de tous les Français et qui n'a pas vocation à effectuer une différence en fonction de l'origine, de la religion ou d'ailleurs de toute autre considération.
But does she apply the same logic to Islamophobia?
Mais je ne sais pas ce que c'est l'islamophobie. Moi, je ne sais pas ce que c'est. Voilà. Je note que cette islamophobie est un concept qui a été utilisé pour empêcher les gens comme moi de lutter contre le fondamentalisme islamiste. Voilà.
In France's Muslim neighborhoods, Islamophobia is seen as a very real phenomenon. France is home to the largest Muslim population in Europe. Muslims here feel unfairly targeted by laws banning religious clothing in schools and public buildings. Yasser Louati is a community activist in Paris's largely Muslim suburbs.
You are 4 times less likely to get a job if you are Muslims. If you are a Muslim woman wearing a headscarf, you have 1% chances of getting a job. So your exclusion is programmed and is scheduled, and you will encounter structural discrimination and exclusion at every step of your life.
France's troubled history with immigration goes back to the 1950s and 60s, when millions of North Africans poured across the Mediterranean and settled here. Many were Algerians who had fought on the side of France in Algeria's War of Independence. They quickly formed a kind of underclass. They never seemed to be accepted as fully French.
We are reaching the 3rd and 4th generation, and people not feeling part of this country. Muslims are always sent back to their ethnic group, to their country of origin, to their religion, to their neighborhood, to their class, but they are never part of the us with a capital U.
There is a growing realization in France that the inequities of the school system are a major contributing factor to the country's immigration struggles. British journalist Peter Gumble has written a book cataloging the systemic discrimination against any student from a different cultural background.
The large majority of these kids will not go on to higher education. They'll get what they call oriented to some professional qualification, which is deemed to be second class. And they will already, as they come into this, it's a middle school, and as they come into this middle school, already a lot of them will have problems with basic reading, writing, math, which they will never catch up on. And so this is the sort of place which is like a factory for failure.
The figures show that if you are not French from a long time ago, if you don't fit into the sort of the mold of the French system, if the chances are that you won't get a job, that you will drop out of school, that you will fail, that you will not have a great life, and that you will not prosper.
In 1983, there was a landmark protest in France. Thousands of North African immigrants marched the almost 800 kilometers from Marseille to Paris, demanding to be accepted and to play a greater role in French society. The socialist government of the day was receptive and supportive of the protest and promised to work towards inclusiveness. Nathalie Nougaret is the former editor of the Paris newspaper Le Monde.
What happened after that, I think, was a series of disappointments that many Muslim youth, came to think that this society didn't really accept them, didn't really want to help them. And still today, in many ways, and even before the terrorist attacks, we know that this disgruntlement, this dissatisfaction was very strong.
Then, in 2005, came the massive riots in the Paris suburbs, driven mostly by the anger of young Muslim men. They complained that nothing had changed in 20 years, that they faced discrimination at every stage of their lives.
There are too many obstacles. It starts at school, but then it continues when you try and get a job. You put your name in your CV, and immediately that's a black mark against you because you're not called Jean-Baptiste or Jean-Christophe. You're called Mohamed or Ahmed.
These racial and religious tensions in France play out in everyday life and in politics. Take this upscale market in the town of Béziers, 750 kilometers south of Paris.
Ça va? C'est bien.
Town Mayor Robert Ménard was elected in 2014 under the banner of the anti-immigrant National Front Party.
Et nous, on est fiers d'être ici, on est fiers des Halles et on est fiers d'être Biterrois. Merci à vous.
He is here to celebrate the renovation of this market, which he wants to keep free of any Muslim customers or Muslim food.
Ça suffit le halal. Ici, ça n'a pas sa place. Je n'ai pas envie de femmes voilées dans les halles, je n'ai pas envie de cuisine halal. J'ai envie de redire qu'on est ici chez nous. Voilà.
When the massive refugee camp near the northern city of Calais was recently dismantled, cities and towns across the country were each asked to take in a few refugees. The city of Béziers was asked to accept 40 migrants, but Mayor Ménard refused.
Parce que c'est 40 migrants de plus. C'est 40 migrants de trop. Pardon, dans une ville où il y a une telle population d'origine immigrée, où il y a déjà 2 centres d'accueil pour les demandeurs d'asile, oui, il y a trop d'immigration dans mes villes. Il y a des seuils de tolérance.
This openly racist attitude from Ménard has earned him some derision.
Toi, le maire de Béziers, tu nous as bien...
On this national TV show, he was teasingly compared to Adolf Hitler.
Comme le célèbre Adolphe Buffon.
Ça suffit.
Non, mais non. Non, Robert, attends. Non, attends.
In the streets of France, there are now pitched battles over immigration issues. On one side are students and other left-wing groups expressing solidarity with refugees.
Solidarité avec les réfugiés!
On the other side is the identity generation, a powerful youth group dedicated to the preservation of France's traditional white Catholic identity. They favor the expulsion of all illegal immigrants from the country. At night, a subgroup called Solidarity Generation patrols the streets to give out food to homeless people that are truly French. The first men they encounter apparently don't qualify.
Pierre, juste un café?
No food for them, only coffee.
Juste café.
Apparently the next group is white enough.
Est-ce que vous avez faim? Vous avez besoin de pain?
They get coffee and food too. Group leader Pierre Larcy is unapologetic about his approach.
Nos gouvernements aident sans limite les migrants, en leur débloquant des maisons, en leur débloquant des fonds. On veut combler ce déséquilibre en aidant les nôtres, en aidant les Français.
But what is it to be French? For years, the definition of the French identity has been widely debated. There is an attachment to the revolutionary values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. There is devotion to state secularism, keeping religion out of public life. Leading sociologist Patrick Simon says his recent detailed studies of French attitudes have led him to a controversial conclusion.
French national identity is now more than ever like a club. And to be a member of the club, you have to be accepted into it. And to be accepted into it, you have to be white. And at the end of the day, the fact of being black or Arab is perceived as a sign of not being fully French. The French national identity is putting people apart.
Simon's studies show that 40% of French-born Muslims don't feel they are regarded as truly French by other citizens. The recent terrorist attacks in Paris drew attention to the fact that many of the perpetrators were disaffected French-born children of Muslim immigrants.
They are born in France, they are raised in France, they have been to school in France, and they have been through a trajectory of exclusion. It's not a reason to commit, of course, terrorism. But we give more argument that there is no future for the Muslims in France because of discrimination and exclusion.
Marine Le Pen and the National Front say they are not against Muslims, just against Islamic religious fundamentalism.
c'est-à-dire de lutter contre la charia, c'est-à-dire de lutter contre ceux qui cherchent en réalité à effondrer les lois et la Constitution française et la culture qui est la nôtre pour imposer une culture qui nous est non seulement totalement étrangère, mais qui est totalement étrangère à nos valeurs. Voilà. Parce que je pense que c'est le nouveau totalitarisme du XXIe siècle, le fondamentalisme islamiste.
One of the key promises of the National Front is to strip the French nationality of any French-born dual citizen implicated in a terrorist crime. Recently, even the socialist government considered implementing that policy.
Basically, it's saying, because you're somehow only half French, you're suspect. And as soon as you cross the line, we'll take away your French part. We don't want you here. It's not saying... The right answer should have been, we have a real issue with integration, we have a real issue with radicalization, we need to deal with it, and we need to deal with it by integrating better, by educating better, by helping these kids get out of these ghettos and get jobs. And instead of that, it's, you damn foreigners, you know, you're blowing us up, and we're going to strip you of your French nationality. Completely the wrong answer.
The fact that France now has Europe's largest Muslim population and its most powerful anti-immigration party is creating an explosive mixture.
It creates a kind of vicious circle where you have a phenomenon of radicalization among some of France's Muslim youth, which is undeniable. And then on the other side, you have this reaction, this political reaction of a big part of the French electorate. You know, 7 million people voted for Marine Le Pen's party in December 2015, just weeks after the terrorist attacks in Paris. So there's like, it's like a vicious circle because these two things can feed each other.
Paris, the day after Donald Trump won the US election.
C'était le peuple français.
The National Front's #2 man, Florian Philippot, and his supporters seem to think that the Trump victory means they are headed for power too.
On s'est en tout cas réveillé avec une excellente nouvelle, l'élection de Donald Trump à la présidence américaine.
Nous vivons la fin d'un monde et la naissance d'un autre.
Marine Le Pen is riding the anti-immigrant wave in France, which has taken her party from the extreme fringes to a leading contender.
La réalité, c'est que le Front National, lorsque il était à 10-15%, était un mouvement de contestation, c'était un mouvement d'opposition. Lorsque je suis arrivé à la tête du Front National, j'ai souhaité en faire un parti qui mènerait au gouvernement et qui s'adapte à la réalité d'aujourd'hui.
While Marine Le Pen is almost certain to make it into the second round of the French presidential election on May 7th, she faces likely defeat then because the vote against her will not be divided. Nevertheless, her popularity has moved even left-wing parties to adopt more aggressive policies towards French Muslims and immigration. Terence McKenna, CBC News, Paris.
It's clear that many in France fear some sort of Muslim takeover, but do those fears have any basis? Last year, Ipsos Mori surveyed people in 40 countries, asking what proportion of their population they believed to be Muslim. The average guess in France was 31%, but the latest data from Pew Research put the figure at 7.5%. In Canada, the average guess was 17%. The truth, 3.2%. Up next, what it's like to coach North Korea's hockey team. 3 Canadians have quite a story to tell. Donating your body to science is about altruism, and it can be heartbreaking when that generosity is forgotten. But that's what happened after the recent death of a New Brunswick man. When his wife couldn't find out what went wrong, she contacted Go Public. Here's Rosa Marcatelli.
He really was my life. You know, when he died, part of me went with him. Elizabeth and Galen Rowe were married in 2007. He was an accomplished U.S. broadcaster who moved to New Brunswick after meeting her online. In life, they made decisions about death together.
We decided that, for the good of science, we'll donate our bodies.
When her husband passed away from a heart problem in February, staff at the Fredericton Hospital told the family the donation to Dalhousie University's medical school was made, but it wasn't. Instead, the body was left, forgotten in the hospital's morgue. His widow had no idea until she spoke with the coroner 9 days later.
He said, I have some very sad news for you. And he said, your husband is in the morgue. He said, the pathologist called me and he didn't go to Dalhousie like he was supposed to.
Out of the more than 1,000 Canadians who donate their bodies to universities every year, almost all go as planned. The problem, according to this estate planning lawyer, situations like this feed into people's worries about donating.
When it's something that's really emotionally laden, like this kind of thing, it adds a kind of urgency, a kind of stress.
It wasn't until Go Public asked New Brunswick health officials what happened that it became clear why the body was left in the morgue. Universities have different protocols when it comes to donations, and in this case, the hospital called the wrong number, notifying an organ transplant program, not the one for donating bodies. The two programs are unrelated.
So the staff in the emergency department thought they had called the right number, but in fact they hadn't. And because they hadn't, it never started the process for the donation to Dalhousie.
It's kind of sickening when you think about it.
By the time the mistake was discovered, it was too late to carry out Galen Rowe's wishes. Decomposition had set in.
In every sense of decency, this is wrong.
The health authority says it now plans to update its reference material to clarify who staff should call and when. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Calgary.
A rare Canadian coin has been stolen in Germany, and the culprit certainly wasn't a pickpocket. This is what was taken, a massive gold coin known as the Big Maple Leaf. Its face value is $1 million, but at 100 kilograms of nearly pure gold, its real worth is about 6 times that. Thieves stole it from a museum in Berlin before dawn this morning. The Canadian Mint says it's one of 5 giant gold coins made for private collectors. The original is safe and sound in an Ottawa vault. Somebody's trash has turned out to be a treasure for a thrift store in southern Ontario. A volunteer recently found a painting in a donation bin. The bright colors were the trademark of Maud Lewis. An original work by one of Canada's best-known folk artists can be worth more than $20,000. The painting, now authenticated, will be auctioned off later this spring. It was an oh-so-Canadian mission to the most secretive nation in the world. A group of Montrealers went to North Korea recently for a hockey experience like no other. Salima Shivji caught up with some of the Canadian players today at a rink in Montreal.
These 3 Montrealers are used to lacing up their skates for casual games in a beer league. One of them has even played in breathtakingly remote locations, but never as isolated as North Korea. So when Jean-Marie La Rochelle heard a group of Canadian hockey players was going there, at first he couldn't believe it.
I text the guy and say, yeah, it's on. If you wanna join, let me know. I love Korea, and I always wanted to go visit the North. To mix ice hockey and North Korea was just the best combination for me.
It was a chance not only to play in the world's most reclusive nation, but to help coach North Korea's national team. Much like Dennis Rodman's basketball diplomacy, they hoped this would be hockey diplomacy. La Rochelle recruited his 2 buddies, and they were off. Once in Pyongyang, a guide was with them 24/7, and state television documented their every move, not just on the ice, also at tourist sites, complete with color commentary broadcast to the nation.
And paid respects with infinite reverence for the great leaders.
That's when it hit them this was about more than just hockey.
You realize that you're kind of part of their propaganda machine, and you don't really have a choice but to play along. There's a bit of an unfortunate aspect to that, but for us, it was not anything that was too invasive.
There were some shaky moments.
One of the guys came to me and she sat next to me and told me, so I heard you speak Korean. And she had really weird eyes, like suspicious eyes. Yes, I speak a little Korean, and she was kind of scared at first that maybe I was a spy or something.
But most surprising for these guys was what they saw on the ice.
We lost the first game 16-1, I think, and they were really good. So we learned a little from them, and I guess they learned a little bit too from us.
Despite the constant surveillance, when asked if they'd do it all again and head back to North Korea, their answer is simple.
And personally, I would go in a heartbeat for sure.
In fact, they're already in talks to make it happen again next year. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Montreal.
Now stay tuned for what's got to be tonight's funniest story. It's all about reality TV and a failure to communicate. These spectacular images were taken on the world's first charter flight to see the Aurora Australis, also known as the Southern Lights. 134 passengers paid up to $6,000 a seat for a flight from New Zealand to the Antarctic Circle and then back again, just for a rare mid-air view of the Southern Hemisphere's version of our Aurora Borealis. A reality TV program to tell you about with a plot twist you just can't make up.
23 total strangers.
Under the yellow brick road.
Hello! Alone and cut off from civilization for an entire year.
So this is it, home.
A British TV network sent volunteers into the Scottish wilderness. And after a full year cut off from modern life, cast members came home to find out no one had been watching. The show had been canceled months ago due to poor ratings. It's not clear why they weren't told, but you can bet the network is probably thinking about resurrecting the program now. That's The National this Monday night. For news at any hour, you can always go to our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm Peter Mansbridge. Thanks for watching.